So your project manager said that, okay, you done the setup of the Kubernetes cluster, and you have the environment. He said that you just join, and they have started new on a new project, and they said that you have a dev QA prod environment in your projects, and you have to deploy. Suppose you have the e-commerce applications, and you have to deploy their microservices or applications. Okay, deploying the apps or microservices in particular environments. So they have the, like you have the you have the microservice like payment, sales, purchase, they are more like this. They have the modules, they have the microservices, and you have to deploy these microservices or application in particular environments. So developer develop the code, and they said that you have to deploy these applications on dev, QA, and prod environments. So what you will do? You have the Kubernetes cluster, you have the domain, okay, you have the code, and you want to deploy. So how will you separate these applications or microservices in a particular environment? So I will sharing my experience, what we did or what our project manager suggested. So you will create a, you have the only one cluster, and you want to separate these. For example, you have the payment applications, okay, you have the payment applications, and you want to deploy these applications into the first in dev environment, then QA environment, then prod environment. Okay, so how will you separate, how will you identify these applications or microservices in particular environment? Then solution is namespace. Okay, so in projects there are multiple objects. So in Kubernetes we can call as objects whatever you are deploying microservices. Okay, so in general terminology, what are the main, so application wise components are pods, deployment. So these we are going to cover in the next session. Just remember the name: service, ingress, secrets, okay. So in one application, so like I have the application payment. So for the payment application, I have the pods, I have the deployment, I have the service, I have the config map, I have the ingress, I have the secrets. This topic we are going to cover practically. Okay, just remember the names. So in one application, these type of objects can call as it as objects. Okay, Kubernetes objects. Okay, so we want to segregate or separate Kubernetes object as per the environments. So to separate these objects into the as per the environments dev QA prod. So then there is option in Kubernetes, that is namespace. So namespace, what is a namespace? Okay, dividing into the logical. Okay, logical cluster. So in one cluster, so one cluster I have set up the cluster, that is a physical cluster. Okay, I have the master and worker nodes. So namespace I will dividing into the objects into the logical cluster. So another name of namespace is the logical cluster. So in that case I will create a namespace. Okay, so I will create a namespace for dev, QA and prod. These namespace I will create. I will separate these my microservices or applications in deploy the application in particular environment dev, QA, prod. So I can identify this microservices belongs to the dev, this microservices belongs to the QA, this microservices belongs to the prod. Okay, like this I will do. So as a DevOps engineer, your job to first set up the cluster. Next, ask the project manager what are the our environment. He said like we have the right now dev and QA. Then create a namespace dev QA and deploy your applications in that environments. So let's cover some practical commands. Okay. Okay, I done the setup of Kubernetes cluster. So let's check. Okay, cluster is ready. So when we create a cluster, so by default inbuilt there are three names for services. So what are the default namespace? Okay. Okay, first one is the default, second one is the Kube-system, third one is the Kube-public. Okay, so when you create a cluster, there are already three namespaces are present in the Kubernetes. Okay, it is an inbuilt namespace. So what is this? So if you don't define the or you are not created any namespace, so by default when you deploy the applications or microservices, it goes to the default namespace if you not define. Okay, and it has unlimited resources. It utilizes all the resource consumes of your Kubernetes cluster. Okay, so for that purpose we use the default namespaces. So Kube-system, it is for the system configuration. So when we add the any objects which is related to system or Kubernetes cluster, it deploy in the Kube system namespace. and this namespace Kube-public, it is used by okay. Then you will ask which are the can you give the example of system or Kubernetes related configuration which will deploy in the Kube-system namespace, for example ingress. Okay, so when we create any ingress, so you will just remember the name. This topic we are going to cover when you deploy any ingress service. Okay, so these service are created in the Kube-system namespace, and Kube-public, it is used by the Kubernetes. Okay, so we don't have to touch, or we can not use this namespace. These two namespace only we can use Kube-system and default. So you have not defined any namespace uh, for your application, so it will deploy in the default namespace. Okay, so let's check whether it is namespace are present in Kubernetes clusters. Let's clear the screen. So command is to check the namespaces. So as I said you, we will be using the kubectl. Okay, this is a command line interface for Kubernetes, like Ubuntu. If you have the Ubuntu system, and you will use the to update package sudo update, like, or sudo up install. Okay, like this command interface, we have the kubectl. To check the namespace using the kubectl command is kubectl get namespaces. Okay. Okay, one more namespace is added by the Kubernetes Corps. Okay, one it is for Corps, but main is the default one, Kube-public Kube-system. Okay, and you want to see what is the inside of these namespaces. You want to describe these namespaces. To describe the namespace command is kubectl describe namespace name. Okay, so it is saying that you don't have any resources type default. Okay, let's check on the namespace Kube-system. Okay, let's check this command describe namespace Kube-system. Okay, so you can see that this type of information available in a Kube-system namespace. So there is some file which is created by the Kubernetes clusters. So like this you can describe your namespace. The short form also command is that kubectl get ns. You can use this command also for short namespaces or ns. Okay, so like services or some, there are many short form commands, so you will cover. So let's create a namespace. As you said that you have the dev, QA and prod environments. Okay, so I have collected some commands. Okay, so we check that get to check the namespaces, kubectl get namespace, or to particular namespace. If you want to enter into the particular namespace, command is kubectl namespace Kube-system. So Kube-system is my namespace, and get is to enter the, so here it is saying that this is the name of the namespace, what is the status, and what is the age. Okay, when you created this namespace. Okay. Okay, so how you can create a namespace? So there are two ways you can create using the kubectl command. Okay, and another is the you can create a namespace using the YAML or JSON format. But in production or as a DevOps engineer, so we widely use the YAML format. Okay. So let's create a namespace. So command is create the namespace kubectl create namespace del. Okay, so it want only short form. Okay, namespace is created. So to check whether namespace is created, kubectl get ns. So you can see that I have created the namespace. Okay. So this namespace we have created using the kubectl commands. So let's create a namespace using the YAML. What you have to do, just create a YAML file using the any your favorite editor like Vim, Nano. Let's use the Nano command. Sudo Nano. So I'm creating the file Kubernetes namespace dot YAML. So I will paste these YAML. So in YAML what we are defined. So this is a kind. Okay. There are some terminology you have to aware that kind is a namespace. Suppose I am deploying the pod, kind can be a pod, kind can be a config map, kind can be a deployment, kind can be a service. Okay. Kind can be a networking. So whatever we are deploying the objects, we can call as a Kubernetes objects. So whatever we are deploying the objects in Kubernetes, we have to mention as a kind. Then API version will version, this is compulsory. So what version? So v1. And metadata is like a description. Okay, description of the my namespace name. It is a KS prod, or we simply call it as a prod. Save the file. Okay, so I have created the YAML. Okay, so how to deploy the YAML? Command is kubectl create -f or YAML, or you can use kubectl apply -f. These two commands you can use to apply to create any objects using the YAML. Okay. So let's use this command create command kubectl create -f and my YAML and enter. Okay, we are getting the error. Okay, so let's check unknown field name. So let's value you have to check syntax of YAML. So let's check the syntax of YAML, is it correct? Okay, so we need a space. So after metadata in name, so we need one space. Okay, this is YAML to create a namespace. Let's check whether it is created. Command is kubectl get ns. So we have created dev namespace and prod namespace. So to describe the namespace, command is kubectl describe namespace dev. Okay, so right now nothing is there. So let's deploy a one sample pod into the namespace. So how to deploy pod? So again, you can deploy the pod in a namespace using the kubectl or YAML. But in production, so we use the widely used YAMLs. So there are many configuration or specific configuration related to your projects. So you'll be creating YAMLs. Let's run one Nginx pod in a namespace. So command is, so how you will create a pod in a namespace. Command is kubectl run to run the pod. Pod name is Nginx and image name is Nginx. Okay, and I am defining here deploy this pod into the dev namespace. Okay, run the command. Okay, pod is created. So let's check pod is created. Command is kubectl get pods. So here you can see that there is a nothing is there, or you cannot see pod in this default namespace. As I said you, by default you are not defined any namespace, it will go to the defaults. So we have deployed in the namespace dev. How to verify, how to check the pods in particular namespace? Command is kubectl get pods hyphen namespace dev. So we have deployed a pod in dev namespace. Okay. Or another command is kubectl get pods. Just you can use the hyphen n also. Okay, and my namespace is dev. Okay, either. So this is standard practice. So you will deploy one application dev applications. So suppose payment hyphen dev, payment hyphen QA, payment hyphen prod. Like this, you will deploying the applications, and you are separating these your microservices as per your environment dev, prod, and QA, and you will be checking this in your namespace. So let's deploy a pod using the YAML in different namespace. So I have the YAML. let's create a pod using the YAML. Here API version v1, kind is the pod, then metadata name is giving the name, just change the namespace pod. Okay. Labels, I have to do the labels. Okay, I'm giving the name, this name. Okay, and containers. Okay, what is my container? Name is I am giving the Nginx container, and image the Nginx. Okay. Let's save the file. Okay, Nginx pod YAML to apply kubectl create -f and my YAML. Okay, pod is created. So let's verify to check the pods in a prod namespace kubectl get pods -n namespace, and my namespace is -pod. Pod is running. Let's verify in dev. Okay, so we have deployed the pod in a dev and prod environments like this. You can select. So what is the next? Suppose you have the only one namespace. Okay, you have the only one namespace and you want to set a default namespace. Okay, for example dev, and you want to set the default. You don't have to enter again and again namespace while checking the any Kubernetes objects. So there's an option, or we can call as a set context. So we can set the your default namespace. So but in production we don't use like this. So just I am giving the example: kubectl config set context current and namespace maybe dev. So like this, using this command you can set the your default namespace. The context is modified. Okay. kubectl get pods, let's check. Okay, so I have said previously we can't see the my pods because it was going to the default namespace. So now I done setup of or set context to use the default namespace is the dev. So just I don't have to specify any namespace while checking the any Kubernetes objects. So I can see my pods, okay, which was we have deployed in the dev namespace. This is all about namespace. To delete the namespace, command is kubectl delete pods -all and namespace, my namespace name. Let's do delete namespaces, delete pods using the from the create prod environment. Okay, pod is deleted. Let's verify whether it is deleted. kubectl get pods -n my namespace. Okay, so there is no resource. This is all about the namespace. This is your second task after creating the cluster. So what is the third task? So so one more permission you have to configure your in your Kubernetes cluster. Okay, that is role binding. Okay, for example, you are the Linux admin, or you have work in on Ubuntu system. So or you are in Windows user. What you do, you set up the Windows or any operating system, and you will create an admin user, right? So same here, to deploy the objects in Kubernetes, to deploy the microservice in Kubernetes, you have to set admin permissions. Okay, whatever to access your Kubernetes resources. Okay, so your application needs or your namespace needs admin permission to access your Kubernetes resource. So just to, so in internet or anywhere you can't find that what you will do or what exact you will do in your projects. So keep in remember, I will share this file also. You have to create a role binding and service account to access your applications. So I have here I have mentioned that you have to create the service account role binding. Okay, so what you there, you will create service accounts namespace dev. This is a Kubernetes inbuilt library, or we can say collizer, and you will do the cluster role binding. Namespace is dev, then authorizes cluster role, you will add cluster role, and you will the cluster admin. Okay, and subject, this is a format service account, namespace name is dev, namespace is div. Okay, keep remember, you have to do the, this is third task in your Kubernetes. Okay, so let's create this one, this role binding. Let's call, give the name sudo nano rback. Role binding, we can say dot YAML. So you will be facing problem. So you have the created cluster, created the namespace, and you have started deploying application. So you can't deploy the applications because you are not given the admin permission to your namespace. Okay. And some do familiar with YAMLs. Okay. So here my kind is a service account, namespace dev. Okay. Role binding, again I have the given the name dev. This is role reference, cluster role, and cluster admin. To create command is kubectl create hyphen f on my YAML. Okay, role binding is created. So now you are ready to deploy your applications or any objects in your Kubernetes cluster. To check, the command is get sa. Okay, so sa means service account. Okay, so we have created the dev service account and dev namespace. So now you can deploy your applications in a dev namespace or dev service account. Also one more I have forgot to yesterday. So when we create a Kubernetes cluster, so it create automatically VPC. You can see go to the VPC. So it's created the my whatever I am giving the cluster Kubernetes cluster name, that is VPC. Then it create the subnets, okay, subnet name, okay. Then it create the route tables, okay. Then it creates the NAT gateway. No, sorry. Let's say endpoint internet gateway. Okay, it create the internet gateway to access outside. Okay, so in route table you will be seeing the routes. Go to the routes. Okay, this is a main route to access your Kubernetes from the outside. You have to do the routes. This is your main subnet, default subnets, and this is a 00 for anything using the this internet gateway. Okay. So you asked that what the difference between the Kube and this COPS. So this is a difference. So in COPS, there is already present VPC. It creates the while creating cluster, it creates the VPC, it creates the subnets, it creates the route table. But in Kube you have to manually create this route table, subnet, and VPC.